I grew up in Dayton, Idaho, a nice little town. It was a wonderful place to grow up. My name is Ethel Beutler then, and I loved being in Dayton. I was always proud to be a Beutler because it was a respected name, because my dad and Uncle Ernest were known as respectable, honest men. And my mother and Aunt Pearl also, and Irene Swartz, and we all lived in Dayton Ward. And we were all a big, happy family. We enjoyed each other, and everybody was kind and helpful to all the people that were there. I was living in Dayton, Idaho, which is a very good place to live. That's where I enjoyed my childhood. Did a lot of fun things. Especially I played with my sister Margaret, who is 2 years younger than me. We played dolls a lot. And we played with the kittens, and we'd catch the kittens and dress them up like dolls. And put them in their doll buggy, but they didn't stay. They hopped out pretty soon and ran off with their doll clothes. So we had to go and catch the cat and take the clothes off. And then we played a lot of outdoor games with my brothers and sisters. I'm one of 8, and my older brother, he loved to play softball, so he taught us all how. We played softball a lot, and with our neighbors and our cousins. And we played No Bears Out Tonight, and we played Run My Sheepy Run, which is a fun game that I don't know if the children nowadays know how to play it. But it's really fun. We played Any Eye Over the House. That's where you take a ball and you throw it over the house, and the other team on the other side tries to catch it. And then you don't know which side they're going to run around to try to touch you, so you try to not get touched with the ball. We also had bikes and trikes. And in the evening after supper, we would run out to see who got the favorite bike and who got the favorite trike, and the third person got the one that wasn't so nice. But so we had a lot of competition with our brothers and sisters, but we had a lot of fun. We didn't have a TV. Never had a TV until I was probably in my 20s. But we had a radio. And Saturday mornings was our favorite time because Let's Pretend came on the radio Saturday morning. And they had fairy tales, all kinds of fairy tales. And every week we had to listen, me and my sisters. And Mother was wanting us to get our Saturday work done, but she decided it was better to wait till we listened to Let's Pretend. And then we'd make a list of jobs. She would make a list of jobs, and we'd choose her jobs, and then we would get to work. Well, me and my sisters loved to have the old catalogs, because the Sears and Roebuck catalogs had a lot of pictures in them. And so when the new catalog would come, Mother would let us use the old one. So we would find a real nice paper doll in there, cut her out, and then we'd get the dresses and the clothes and everything that would fit. And we cut them out, and so we made a lot of paper dolls. And we also, my sisters and I, especially Margaret, we made mud pies a lot in the summer. And we would go to the sparrow's nest. There was a shed, and there was sparrows with a big nest in the shed. We'd knock the nest down and get the little tiny sparrow eggs, and we'd put the eggs in our mud pie and stir it around and make our mud pies. And we thought that was really fun. Another thing that we did when we were young is Margaret and I had a playhouse. So we played dolls, but we had this playhouse, and we'd fix furniture of things that we would find around the farm, and we had a lot of fun doing that. And then we had a merry-go-round that my dad made, which was a board that was kind of warped and it went sideways, but anyway, he fixed it up for a merry-go-round, and we used to get really dizzy, but we had a lot of fun on the merry-go-round. Then in the winter, we'd go sleigh riding. We'd go out to our canal, and there was quite a hill from the canal down to the field, so we'd go sleigh riding down the hills. We spent a lot of happy hours doing that. Well, we had a phone, and some of the neighbors didn't have a phone, but we were lucky we had a phone, but it was a party line. There were about 5, 6 people on the party line, and you'd have 1 ring, and somebody else would have 2 rings, or somebody would have 3 rings. And we liked to listen in on the party line and see who was talking, but my mother wouldn't let us listen. But sometimes when you want to use the phone, somebody was talking, you couldn't use the phone, you have to wait till they're through. The earliest thing I can remember is the day I turned 5 years old. And that was a special day, but I didn't know it was at the time. But my parents told all of us children to go over to Sister Dolly's, to our neighbors, and that was unusual because it was towards evening, and they never told us to go there. We usually had to ask if we could go. Well, they told us to go over, so we went over to Dolly's. When we got there, Sister Dolly wasn't there, but her girls were there. And when they found out it was my 5-year birthday, they made some fudge for me. And in their kitchen, they had a light, a socket and a light that hung down from the ceiling. And the bulb wasn't in. Well, I stood up on a chair and I put my finger up in the socket, just out of curiosity, and I couldn't pull my finger out. I can't remember getting shocked, but something about the electricity held my finger in there, and I couldn't get it out until they came and turned the switch off, and then I could take my finger out. But that was my 5th birthday, and then when we went home, so then pretty soon Sister Dolly came. She'd been over to our house, and she came home and she said, "You have a new little baby brother." That's why they sent us over to the Dolly's house. Well, my little brother Henry was born on my birthday, and I was so special. We always shared our birthdays and had a lot of fun, and I figured he was my birthday present. Well, when we got old enough to work, then we didn't always play. Then we started working in the beet field. I'd say when we were about 6 or 7. We were old enough to start thinning beets and hoeing weeds. And so in the spring, we have to thin the beets. If they're too close together, they don't grow nice and big. And so you have to go along, bend over with a short-handled hoe, and take out a lot of the beets. In fact, most of the time we ended up crawling on our knees instead of bending over. So we'd go along, all of us in the beet field, trying to hoe beets, and we would get so tired, trying to thin the beets, we'd get so tired. And my older brother, Lauren, was 6 years older. He'd come along and we'd say, "Oh, Lauren, come and help us, we're so tired." So he'd come along and do a few paces in our row, and then he'd go back to his row, and then we were excited again. Because he helped us in our row. Well, when we got the beets thinned, then they grew a little, then we hoed the beets. And then the next time when the weeds came back again, we hoed the beets again. It seemed like we hoed beets all summer. But the hard part was in the fall, when the beets were ready to be harvested. They went along with the plow and loosened the dirt and kind of plowed them out. But we had to go along with a fork, a beet knife, I should say. And it had a pick on it, and you'd pick up the beet and you'd chop off the top and you'd throw it in a pile, and you'd have to have a picture to see how we did the beets. But sometimes it was cold and stormy in the fall. Sometimes it was nice weather when we did the beets, like in October. But once in a while it snowed, and then so once in a while it froze in the ground. And so we had these rubber overalls that my dad bought for each of us that we wore to try to keep our legs dry. And when it was snowy and frozen in the ground, we wanted to get those beets harvested. That's where your money came from, was selling the beets. So then it was not too pleasant. But I remember so much, after we'd worked in the beet field, we'd go back home for lunch, for dinner at noon. And Mother would have a real nice dinner all fixed, and it'd be nice and warm in there, and the house would be so clean. It just feels so good to go in and have our dinner. So then we go back out in the afternoon and thin some more beets, hoe some more beets or top them. But one thing we did in the summer, after we hoed beets, we'd go home at noon and have our dinner, and then we could go swimming in our canal. The canal was only about up to our waist when we were just little kids, so we weren't really swimming. We were mainly playing in the water and the mud, but we always called it going swimming, and we thought it was fun. One time we coaxed our mother and father to go swimming. We kept coaxing them and coaxing them, go swimming with us, go swimming with us. And I'm sure they really didn't want to. But one day they decided to go swimming with us. So they did. They came in the canal and they went wading around in the water with us, and I remember that. Well, I learned to drive horses, the work horses, and tractors, and whatever was needed. All of us children, the 8 of us, we all learned those kind of things. And one thing we did is drive the derrick horse. We would hook it on the derrick, and when we were putting hay on the stack, we'd have to ride the derrick horse and go forward and let the fork down, get a bunch of hay, and then the horses back, back, back. You'd have to pull those big work horses and say back, back, back. Finally, they'd back up enough, which would raise the hay on the fork, raise it up high, and then the derrick would swing it over to the haystack, and then they'd dump it. And then you'd do it again, all for hours till you got that whole load unloaded. And sometimes we used the tractor and on the derrick, and sometimes we used the horse. But we did a lot of work. And one thing when working in the beets, I was telling about working in the beets, we got paid for working in the beets. We got paid so much a row. Those rows were long. When you're a little child, those rows are really long. But we got paid so many cents for how many rows we got done. So we worked hard, and we'd always write down our rows. When we go back to the house, we'd write down, keep track how many rows we did, and then at the end of the year, or at the end of the season, why, our dad would pay us, and then we'd get our money for the year. We were so proud, happy to get our money. And so we would pay our tithing, figure out our tithing, and then we'd keep our money in our special drawer. And I used my money for my school year, all year, or if I want to buy clothes, or if I need to buy anything for Christmas or anything, I used my money for my lunch money, whatever I had, and usually I had enough money to last me the whole school year. So I liked learning how to manage money, which was very worthwhile throughout my life. There's one more job that we did that we didn't really like. My dad raised chickens, and so we had to gather the eggs, but the worst thing was we had to clean the eggs. Some of them were dirty, soiled from being in the chicken nest, and we had to clean them off, and we all hated to do that. So Mother would go with us, and all us girls, well, it's time to clean eggs. Every Saturday, we'd go down the basement, and we'd all sit around and clean the eggs. So we worked together till we got it all done. That way it made it not quite so bad. My brothers and sisters and I used to make up games while we were hoeing beets. In order to pass the time away, we'd make up guessing games with each other, or we'd hum a tune, and they try to guess what the tune is. Anything we could think up to have some sort of a guessing game as we worked. So we did enjoy our childhood. We also tried to shock each other on the electric fence. And when we were sitting down resting, getting a drink of water or something, we'd put some green leaves, some green weeds, and we'd touch the fence and touch the person with them, and we'd all get shocked. But we thought it was worth it to see them jump. Well, I always loved school. Went to school in Dayton, and all of us in the class, we were all friends. With the boys, girls, we were all friends. We played softball every recess with the kids, our friends. And Elizabeth Galloway was my special friend. And every Sunday afternoon, we would take turns. One Sunday I'd go to her house, one Sunday she'd come to my house, and we would play. Mainly play with dolls, but we always had fun, and we could go home. And then what was sad, in a little while, Elizabeth moved away. Her family moved away. And then my friend, another one moved in, which is Margaret Dowley. So she was my best friend through junior high and high school. And we would also go to each other's place, but the Dowleys were really special people and meant a lot to me in my life. Actually, the whole class of school was our friends. We were friends, and there were about 5 or 6 boys and about that many girls. And on Easter, we'd go for an Easter hike when we were in grade school. And we'd hike up Dayton Canyon, clear up to White Castle. There was a great big rock, which we called White Castle. We'd hike up there and we'd have our boiled eggs and we'd roll them down the hill and crack them, and then we'd eat our little lunch. Well, there were snakes, rattlesnakes up there in that White Castle, and they'd stick their heads out of the rocks. And the boys would throw rocks at them and try to kill as many snakes as they could. I don't know why we were up there playing with snakes, but that's what we did. Another thing we did in school, besides softball, is in the wintertime we played jacks. My friends and I, we got really good at playing jacks. They're so fun. You have to be really expert. You have to really practice a lot. Along with playing jacks, we did tumbling. Down in the girls' basement, there was a girls' basement, boys' basement. We had tumbling mats, and we did tumbling, which was very good exercise for us. I always liked school, and especially going to school at Westside High School, because it was a small school. There was only 35 in our graduating class, and we were all such good friends. And with being a small school, you could be in anything you would want to be in. Like, I enjoyed being in the band and the chorus and anything that I would want to be. I was voted in as senior class secretary, which should have been a pretty good thing. But somehow during the year, we had a little bit of money on hand, but we had to spend some, and somehow we got overdrawn at the bank. And there I was, the secretary, I was responsible for that. We had to collect $1 from everybody in the class in order to make up the difference. So I tried harder to keep a good balance and make sure I knew where all the money was. Because I did learn how to do that from my parents. I do know how to manage money. And our children, I'm so glad our children have learned how to manage money too. They're all very good at it. They know how to keep track of it and how to take care of it. When we lived in Winder, we lived on a hill. And there was a place that we kind of put the garbage, and I decided one day to burn the garbage. So I started on fire, and the fire was pretty good, but then the winds came up and started blowing the flames, and they started going on the weeds and going down the hill. I could see that it was going down the hill. I tried to put out the fire with the water hose would not reach far enough. The shovel, I tried with the shovel. I couldn't do it. I was just so afraid because I thought the fire's going to go down the hill and go get on this grain field that was a ways away and burn up their grain. And so I was praying, I was hoping, well, I'm wondering what to do. And here come my dad. He had been down at our river farm on his tractor working. And here he came on his tractor all of a sudden, and he had a plow on it. So he started plowing around a fire line around the fire, just started plowing. And so he got that done. And when the fire got to there, it went out because there was no more fuel to burn and weeds to burn. And I was so relieved. And he said, he was down there working on his field, and something said to him, go up to Ethel's. So he came up there and put out the fire. So our prayers were answered. When I was about 12 years old or so, along in there, the ward would show movies on Saturday nights. They'd show a movie, and we'd all go up to the church, to the amusement hall, and we'd watch a movie. Well, this one night, there was a lot of snow that year. And while we were in watching the movie, a big blizzard came. And it blew and blew, and the road was already had a lot of snow on. And it snowed and snowed, and when we came out of the movie, nobody could get home. The roads were all blown in. It was just, we were just stuck there in a blizzard at the church house. So the neighbors that lived close enough around to walk were so nice, they took all us into their home for the night. And we went with them, and we stayed overnight, and different families would stay with some other families. So we stayed overnight, and then my dad got up in the morning and walked home through the fields, a mile home through the snow to milk the cows, and then we had to wait until the snowplow came during the day and cleaned off the roads. Well, the first date I had was when I was in 8th grade. There was no rule then that said you should be 16, like the prophetess said. But we were going to have an 8th grade graduation, which was a special thing. We all dressed up nice and had a graduation ceremony. So the boys in our class decided they should get dates. So this one boy asked me for a date, and so I went home and asked Mother, well, can I go on a date with Richard? And Wiley's going to go, and Eldon. There's going to be 4 boys in the car and 4 girls. And so my mother said, well, I guess you can. You're all going together. So all 8 of us crowded in that car, and we had our first date, and we went to our graduation. And after graduation, they took us home, and that was it. Well, when I got baptized, we didn't have a big family gathering like we do now with our family, because everyone comes to all the baptisms, is everyone who can. When I got baptized, I remember my parents took me over to Preston, to the ward house that had a baptismal font. And the young priests were there to baptize, and my dad said it's good to give them experience. So some young priest baptized me who I didn't know. And my sister, my friend Cleo Hewlett was baptized the same day, and she had long ringlets and her hair floated. They had to baptize her 3 times in order to get her hair wet. But I didn't have that trouble. But I remember coming out, I feel so clean. I thought, I'm so clean now, I got to stay clean. And then when I got confirmed the next day on Sunday, my dad confirmed me, and I always was so happy to have the Holy Ghost, because I know that many times that the Holy Ghost kind of told me not to do something that I was thinking to do. I knew I shouldn't do that. I knew that was the Holy Ghost. Being a member of the church has always been so important to me. In fact, the gospel was the center of my life, all my life. And my parents taught us to go to church. We always went. And one time, when I was about 10 years old, I think my mother was very wise. I decided one day I didn't want to go to church. And I thought, if I tell Mother I don't want to go to church, she'll say, oh yes, you need to go. So I went to Mother and I said, I don't want to go to church today. And she said, okay. Well, I was so surprised. But I couldn't just say, well, I'm going to go. Well, I had to stay home because I said I was going to stay home. So I stayed home that morning, and they all went to Sunday school. And that seemed like such a long Sunday to me. Oh, it was so long, and I kept looking up there at the church house to see when those cars were going to move and come home. And I never, ever did that again. Then after I got married, the church was still very important, and we lived in Winder Ward, and it was busy, a small ward, and so you were busy with different callings. And I had a calling in Relief Society. On Tuesdays was Relief Society. On Wednesdays was primary. And then we had stake meetings in those days. And then I also played the organ for Sunday school. So each month I had 3 stake meetings. Every 3 Saturdays in a row, I'd have a stake meeting at 2 o'clock. Well, Kay was always very supportive. Whatever I was called to do, he would tend the children all 3 Saturday afternoons in the wintertime while I went to stake meeting. In the summer, he couldn't really stay there and tend the children, but he did that for a lot of times in the winter. When I was about 16 or 17, we had a fun time in Sunday school class. All of us kids sit and talk and laugh and carry on, and the teacher wasn't in control, and we just got by with a lot of talking and giggling. Well, we got a new teacher, Lou Page. And my goodness, you know what? She wouldn't let us talk and laugh. She kept our attention, and she taught us the lesson, and she taught us these interesting stories about the Book of Mormon that I really didn't know them all. In those days, no one brought their scriptures. We weren't encouraged to read our scriptures. I hadn't read in the Book of Mormon. The teachers at church did not even bring their scriptures. They brought their lesson manual. Well, so she started telling us the stories in the Book of Mormon. My goodness, they were so interesting. And I felt the Spirit as she taught us, because she we were listening and we were learning. So I decided I was going to read the Book of Mormon. So I was 17 years old. And so I started reading the Book of Mormon. And as I read it, I could feel the Spirit. It was just an amazing experience. And that's where, as I read it, I got a testimony. I knew it was true. And so when I was 17, I knew the Book of Mormon was true. I had always believed in the church. I never doubted. I always believed what I was taught. But that time, then I really knew for myself. That was a highlight of my life, and I can still remember how I felt. Music is always very, very important in my life. When I was just young, why, we would stand around the piano, and my older sister Blanche would play the piano, and we'd all stand around and sing as our family. And so I said to my mother, when I was 12, I said, I'd like to take piano lessons because I wanted to learn to play like she did. So I started taking piano lessons, a few from Blanche, but she was in college, and so she would come and go and just give me a few lessons, and Mother would help me a little. And then in a few months, I got better at it, and so Mother had me take lessons from Lucetta Archibald, a great lady, one of my favorite people growing up, and she taught me music lessons. So by the time I was 14, I was asked to be the organist of the junior primary. So when I was 14, I was asked to be organist of the junior Sunday school, which is like primary now. So I was the organist, and I've been an organist ever since. And now I am in our ward now. Besides playing the piano, I love to play in the band. I played the flute in the band and just enjoyed it for junior high and high school. And then in the summer we'd go march at different parades. So I was in the marching band, and the other flutist and I, we carried the flags because the flutes weren't too good of the instrument on marching. But I loved the band and being in the chorus. I was always in the chorus, and Mr. Manning was one of my favorite teachers. He was the band teacher. And in the chorus, I accompany as the Girls' Glee chorus. So I've always enjoyed music. When I was young and growing up, the only place I had been is to Salt Lake City, as far away from home as I had been. But when I was 12, my dad decided to take all of the family to see Aunt Olive in Arizona and Aunt Lavelle in Texas. So we all went in the car. And Grandma Kemp went with us, so there were about 7 of us children and 3 adults, and we went all the way in one car clear down there to Texas. Now I remember when we got to Arizona, we were at Flagstaff. It was snowing. It was late in the fall, but we didn't think it ever snowed in Arizona, but it did. And then we went to Aunt Olive's house in Woodruff, Arizona, and one thing I remember was we wanted to get a drink of water, and she said, oh, don't let the water run. Like we did at home, we let it run to get cold. She said, don't let the water run. They didn't have any extra water. You didn't waste water and let the water run. Then we went to El Paso, where Aunt Lavelle lived, and we stayed with them a day or two, and they took us to Carlsbad Cavern, which was amazing. Great big cavern hole. It's just an amazing place, and I always remembered that. And they also took us into Mexico. So we were really travelers because we had been to Mexico. But when I think about riding in that car with all those kids, I don't know how my mother did it, or where we put our clothes and everything. And we would go, we'd have this jug of water, a couple of jugs, and every town we'd go in, we'd have to get some more water, and some of the water in some towns was just awful. And then we were so glad when we got to a town that had good water, and we could have good water for a while. And we bought lunches. We stopped at grocery stores and buy things for lunch, and we ate lunches. And I think now of my mother traveling with all those kids all that way, we seemed to get along fine, but it would be a big job. My parents were very good, honest, hard-working people. My mother had been a school teacher before she got married, and she was very well educated, in fact, a lot of self-educated, and she liked to read a lot. And she encouraged us to read. By one way she did it was she'd tell us about something she read, and she'd tell us the first part, but she didn't tell us the rest, the end of the story. So of course, we want to read it and see what the end of the story is. So we all learned to like to read that way. She was really my example in everything. She taught me everything I know. In fact, about everything I do in my life, I learned from my mother. She taught us about nutrition. She knew very well. She knew a lot about that. She taught us to cook and to cook healthy food. She taught us how to sew. We learned to sew when we were little children with just sew by hand. And then we always hoped when we got big enough that she'd let us use her machine. And we'd make doll clothes. And then when we got older, we'd make clothes for ourselves, which was really nice. And I sew a lot. I used to. And when my children were growing up, I used to make most of their clothes, and I made about all of my clothes. But now I don't sew much because it's cheaper to buy things. It used to be, material used to be less expensive, and it was cheaper to sew. But now it's really not. My mother taught us to be kind to each other and to be nice to people, and we had a lot of good friends, and she taught us to dress nicely and always be modest. My mother is also an artist. She could paint and do pictures, paint pictures, and also my sister Virginia is an artist. But the rest of us didn't seem to inherit that gift. My dad was a hard-working man and very honest with everyone. He was a mechanic. He could repair anything. He could repair a tractor or motor, any kind of motors. If our shoes broke, he could fix our shoes. Whatever broke, we just took it to Dad and he repaired it. And he also was a carpenter. He built his house, well, actually 2 houses for him, and he also helped to build our house after we got married and we remodeled and built on our house. He was a real good carpenter, even an electrician, and he could do a lot of things. And I watched him, and I learned a lot about how to do things by watching. When he repaired things, he could repair anything. And so I watched him do it, and I learned a little bit about how to repair things, which helped me all through my life. One time when I was about 15, of course we could drive in Idaho, we could drive at 14. I was driving around Dayton. I was having a celebration. And as I went around the corner, I got too close to a car and bumped into something and put a fender bender in our car. And the fender was bent pretty bad. And I was so scared. I thought, oh, I don't know. I don't dare go home and tell my dad I bent the fender. The other thing, whatever I hit was okay. I can't remember what it was. But I hit into something. So I went home finally and told my dad about the fender, and he was so nice and kind. He wasn't mad at me. He said, oh, we can fix that. So he goes out and he gets his hammer and puts a board behind the fender and hammers it out and got it all fixed. That was kind of the kind of thing that he could do. I have a good heritage. I have good parents and good grandparents. My dad's parents were both born in Switzerland, as I said, in another place, and they came to America for the gospel, which is a great heritage for me. My mother's ancestors, her name was Kemp, came from England, and some of them came from Norway, and they all came for the gospel also. So that's why it was so important to me. My Grandpa Beutler, he was a very honest, hardworking man. And grandmother died when she was young, only about 32. And so she had a hard life and not good health. My Grandpa Kemp was a community leader. He was a bishop for 27 years. And he was a community leader in the poetry business. He helped develop a poultry association and raise chickens and lots of eggs. And then he also was a state senator, I think for 3 sessions. And grandmother, she was a great influence in my life. She lived to be 96, and some of our children remember her. She would come and she would teach us a lot. She'd teach us how to make bread. She would teach us different things about what we should do. She'd teach us about how to clean chickens. One summer we were trying to clean chickens, and my sister and I, Margaret, would take turns. She would pull the feathers and I'd clean the inside of the chicken. Well, Grandma said, "Margaret, every woman needs to know how to clean a chicken. You have just got to learn how to clean chickens." And so she tried and tried to get Margaret to do it, and Margaret refused. She would not. She would not put her hand in there and clean chickens. She wouldn't do it. And Grandmother tried and tried all day. She finally gave up, and just gave up in despair that Margaret would never learn. But I had good grandparents, and Grandma Kemp is the only one I really remember very much about, because the others died when I was younger. There were 8 of us. I'm one of 8 children, and so we had a lot of fun and things together. We worked together, we played together. But the year that the older ones were growing up, my brother Lorne went on a mission, and my sister Blanche went on a mission the same year. And then in a month or 2, my sister Hazel got married. That was 3 of them left. That left such a hole in our family. It seemed like hardly anybody was home. And I know there were still 5 children, but it just really left a hole. And then some days we'd come home from school on the bus, all 5 of us, and Mother would be gone. She would be at a Relief Society or something. It just seemed like nobody was home if Mother wasn't there. Uncle Ernest lived next door with his family, so we had cousins that lived just next door. And Uncle Ernest and my dad worked together on the farm. They shared machinery and so on. And so these cousins grew up just like brothers and sisters to us. They were younger than us, and so a lot of times we tended them and we played with them and whatever, but we had fun with our cousins. And then Aunt Irene Swartz also lived in Dayton, and her son Eldon was the same grade as me at school. And Eldon and I were I was the shortest girl and he was the shortest boy. And they taught us to dance in school. And so usually Eldon and I danced together because they'd line us up according to height. But anyway, we had a lot of fun at the dancing at school. Well, when I was 16, we went to a stake dance with some of my friends from Dayton, Margaret Dally and her sisters and my sister Virginia, and some of us went to a stake dance. And Kay came and asked me to dance. I didn't know who he was, but I danced with him, and he was quite the talker, and he got my phone number and things, and the next week he called me up and asked me for a date. So we went to a show. That's what we usually did. First dates, we went to a show. Well, he was quite fun to talk to. At first I wasn't too impressed, but then when we would go about why he was fun to be with, he was fun to talk to, he was very complimentary, and we just got having a lot of fun getting to know each other. So then I would tell my friends about him, and then he met them, some of my friends. Well, they all liked him too because he was so friendly and talkative. And so Margaret Murdoch and Phyllis Moore, some of them, they all liked him, and so we spent a lot of time kind of with them. And Roland and Margaret, we went on dates with them. We went on dates with Blanche and Rio. They were dating at the same time. And then we got married that same year as Blanche and Rio did, and also Lauren and Marilyn. No, Lauren and Ruth. Lauren and Ruth got married in June, and Blanche and Rio got married in May, and we got married in March. We all got married that same year, so we had a lot of good times together. We had 4 boys first, and then we had a little girl, Nyla, and then we had 3 more boys and another little girl. Well, when we were expecting the last one, I said to Nyla, now Nyla, we might have a little boy. And she said, oh no, Mom, it won't be a boy. And I said, well, it might, Nyla. She had 7 brothers, and she said, Heavenly Father knows I've got enough brothers. He knows I need a sister. Well, she had faith for that, but I was really concerned because I didn't know. And well, we had another little girl, which was a great joy for us. But the boys, we loved the boys just as much as the girls, but we were just happy to have some of both kinds. Well, we had a lot of fun with our children as they grew up. We always played ball, we played games, we always played together. Kay and I played with them. We just enjoyed them most of the time. It was a lot of work, but it was also a lot of fun. Well, our older sons went to college after 2 or 3 of them had gone. Maybe even Cordell was at college one year when they changed us from 3rd Ward to 7th Ward. Well, this was kind of a big change because 3rd Ward and 7th Ward were rivals in basketball and softball and everything. And Cordell said, I feel so sorry for my younger brothers having to be on 7th Ward. That's the ward we didn't like. But anyway, we did learn to like them, and they were as good as the other wards. But our boys had always played softball, basketball with the church, and besides then at school, they wrestled. We had to spend a lot of years with watching wrestlers, and we sat on bleachers hours after hours. We have now 5 state champs that wrestled, and Cordell is a 4-time state champ, and Brad is a 2-time, and Kelton, Dwayne, and Dallin all were state champs also. Well, as much as I love music, and I love to just sit down and play the piano just for enjoyment, I wanted our children to have the same experience. So we had music lessons for most all of them. And Lawrence did pretty good, and some of them came along, but some of the boys, at least they learned to read music. And Cordell and Brad both played in the band a couple of years in junior high. But the music didn't stick too much with the boys. But Dallin and Dwayne, they took music lessons also. And now some of our boys sing in the choir, and they know how to read music and they know how to sing. Well, with Nyla and Heidi, they kind of got tired of practicing also, but I didn't stop with I let the boys quit taking lessons. I said, no, you have to learn to play hymns. When you can play hymns, then you can stop taking lessons, and someday you'll thank me. And they have both thanked me for having them learn lessons. And now they're having their children take piano lessons and learn to enjoy music. Music, you should be able to enjoy it and have it in your life, whether you do it with any other people or not, but just so that you can enjoy it in your own life. Well, after I got out of high school, I went to college at USU in Logan for just 1 semester is all I went. Then Kay and I decided to get married. So we got married in March 1955. And we moved over to Preston, and I still helped with the farm work. I'd go out and mow the hay a lot of times, or rake it, or I would drive the truck while Kay loaded the hay. And we had a hay loader that loaded the bales up onto the truck, and he'd say, we gotta hurry, so he could get through and go milk the cows. So I would drive quite fast, maybe too fast, almost faster than he could load it. But we did a lot of things, and I'd have all the 2 or 3 little kids in the truck with me and driving the truck. And so I was glad when our boys got older and they were old enough to help and they'd drive the truck and drive the tractor. Then that was really nice. The thing was, when school started in the fall, I always felt bad because I would miss the children. Besides, there went our help, so I became the tractor driver and the truck driver again. Well, since Kay was a busy dairyman, I was in charge of the garden. And me and the kids helped plant the garden. We got it planted, but keeping it hoed was another problem because the boys that were big enough were always out helping their dad. So it was up to me, and littler kids to keep it hoed, and we didn't always keep it hoed. So the garden wasn't hardly as nice as it is now. But we did raise good food, and we ate out of the garden as much as possible. Corn on the cob and lettuce and hopefully tomatoes and potatoes. And we put up a lot of fruit. In the fall, we'd put up a lot of peaches and all kinds of fruit. We'd put up a lot of bottles of beans and everything. That's one thing we did a lot of. We don't do as much now, but we still do bottle our fruit. Before we got married, Kay had a car. He had bought his own car, but he gave that to his parents because they didn't have one right then, and we had an all-black pickup. And so that's all we had, even till we had 4 children. So we would be in there with our 4 children and to go to church or whatever we did. And coming home from Dayton, sometimes the boys would fall asleep. We'd get home and Kay would carry them in, and a couple of the older boys, he'd carry them all the way in, put them in their bed, and then they'd wake up laughing. They'd woke up as he carried them. But they thought that was a good trick. I learned to cut hair. My mother and dad taught me how to cut hair. In fact, I cut Kay's hair once before we got married. So from that time, I've cut his hair and the 7 boys, and plus my dad and Kay's dad. And then when we were on our missions, I cut some missionaries' hair. And so I have cut a lot of hair through the years. When Lawrence was a baby, we decided to buy a farm down to the river bottom. Well, so we needed as much money as we could get. And Kay's sister Shirley lived in Los Angeles, and she said, you come down here, you can get a job in the winter. So we went, and we left Kay's parents to milk the cows, which was kind of hard for them, but they did that winter. And we went down, and Kay got a job in an airplane factory, and I got a job as a secretary. We found a real good friend to tend Lawrence, and we worked that winter, and we saved all our money to help buy our farm. And then we came home and enjoyed the being home after that. We lived in Winder for about 10 years, and then we decided to move up closer to the barn where the cows were. So we moved up to McIntyre's house when Kelton was a baby. So we had those 6 children. So when we had those 6 children, we moved up to McIntyre's house, and then after a while, Kay's father passed away. So we arranged to move into their house and remodel and build on for our bigger family. And Kay's mother, Grandma Marjorie, moved uptown. We got her a place to live uptown. Well, Dwayne was just a baby. He was crawling around. At that time, we were remodeling, and he was crawling all over the house. And I was trying to keep him up out of the sawdust and clean it up. And little Kelton was about 3 years old, and he said, he saw the men working and hammering nails and building things, and he said, I want to hammer some nails. So Dad got him a big block of wood and a bunch of old nails, a whole bucket full of old nails. Well, he worked and hammered a lot of those nails, and after an hour or 2, he came to me and he says, Mom, I'm too tired to hammer all those nails in. So I told him, you won't need to hammer all the nails. After Kay's dad died, we moved into the house, into their house, and we built on. Well, my dad was a good carpenter, so we asked him to help us plan the plans, drive the plans, and he would kind of help us, and he got Brother Jones to come and help, and he would tell Kay, now we need so much wood, what we need, and then Kay would buy that while my dad was working at the temple. He was a sealer at the temple for 14 years, and so he'd work at the temple, then he'd come back, and then the next day he'd come and work on our house. He and Brother Jones and helped build. We built on the back of the house, built it a lot bigger, and so that was a very worthwhile project, and we appreciated his help. And in the family room, he knew how big windows, how much light you would need, and he helped us to decide all those things. And we enjoy that room so much. And we enjoy the nice big windows and the light, and that's the room we live in. We have been on a lot of trips to different countries, and we never imagined, when we got married, we never imagined we'd go to anywhere but the United States. So it has been a wonderful life, and we've traveled around quite a bit. We've been on some cruises, like to Alaska, Mexico, different places, but we had a nice trip down to Mexico where we went with a group of people who served at the temple. There was a busload of us. We flew to Mexico City, then we traveled around Mexico on the bus, went to different temple sites, and went through the Mexico City temple. It was a really nice trip. Then when we came home from Africa and went to England, as I was telling before, we went to England and we went over to Paris and changed trains, is all we did is change trains there. Then we went to Germany and Switzerland. And then when we got home from Africa's mission, President Botterell, who lives in England, he planned a tour of England for all the couples that were in Africa serving. So in 1907, I think it was, we all went to England, and we were on a bus, and they took us all around England to all the church sites and to the Preston Temple and all around. And then we went with the Webbs, and we went over to Europe, and we went back to Switzerland again. So twice I've been to Switzerland. Then we went to Thailand with Hazel. She had some friends that lived in Thailand that invited her to come, and she didn't want to go by herself. And so I had jokingly said, oh, I'll go with you. Well, so later on she called up and asked, did we want to go to Thailand? So the three of us went to Thailand. Their friends picked us up. We stayed at their home. They took us all around. It was a wonderful trip. It's a long flight, but it was worth it. Then we went to Israel with the World Peace Federation, because that was so good, because we went with them. They took us around on the bus, and it took us different places that we would have never seen on our own. And that was really an amazing experience to go see Israel and where the Savior, we think he was buried. It's not sure, but anyway, we saw the Garden Tomb. And we went to the Palestine inside of the big wall that they build around the wall, the Palestinians, and we felt sorry for them. We felt sorry for people from Israel. We don't know which one to feel that's at fault. I think they both are. But anyway, it was a very educational trip. And then we went to Korea once with the World Peace. We went to Korea. They took us there. They called us up the day before and said, do you want to go to Korea? And Kay said yes. And so they said, we'll be leaving tomorrow. We'll let you know what time. So then they called later that afternoon and said, we need to fly out from Salt Lake about 6 a.m. Well, that meant we had to be down there by 4. That meant we had to leave home before 2. Anyway, so we got packed and we went to Korea. So we've had just amazing trips that we never imagined ever that we would ever do. Well, when our children got old enough, they all planned on going on a mission, all our sons. And so Lawrence went first, of course, and he was called to Italy. And we didn't know where to send his letters. I don't know, we didn't have much experience. And I said to Lawrence when he left, well, when you write to me, then I'll know your address, where to write to you. Well, we waited and waited for a letter. It was about 3 weeks before we got a letter from Lawrence. Then, I don't know, it'd be about another 3 weeks before he got one from us. So that was a long time for him to wait. But all our boys have gone on missions to foreign missions. And I've written a lot of letters. When Lauren and Blanche went on their missions, I wrote letters to them almost every week, because I would think, if I was away from home, I would miss home and I would want letters. So I wrote letters to them. Then when our sons started going, I wrote letters to them every week. So when our 7 sons went on missions, and then Nyla went on a mission to the Philippines also. So we wrote a lot of letters. Now, 3 different times we had 2 missionaries out. Brian and Brad were out at the same time. Nyla and Kelton were out at the same time, and Dallin and Dwayne. So then I would use carbon paper, and I would type the letters sometimes on our typewriter, or I would write it, and then I'd send a carbon to one copy to one of them, and I'd send the original to the other one. So every week, I'm used to writing lots of letters. So now that our grandchildren are on missions, we get emails from them. We send emails to them. It is so nice and so much quicker. I love emails for keeping in touch with our family. Like when I was growing up, there was no TV. We did have a good radio, but we had no TV and all these electric things. And now we have computers and smartphones and everything, but I love the emails because we can keep in touch with our family that way. A few years ago, I can't remember what year it was, but I think it was in the 90s, that our children got computers and emails, and they said to me, "You need to get a computer." And I'd say, "No, I don't need a computer." But they all sent emails back and forth, and they would tell me about them. So one Christmas, here they came and brought us a computer. I'm not sure who it was from, maybe from all of them. Anyway, Kelton and Shane and some of them came and brought it and installed it for us and taught me how to use email. So I started doing email to the family then, and it was so wonderful because when we went on our mission to Africa, we took a computer and we could do emails. We didn't have to send any more slow letters. After I'd been doing those kind of letters all through our children's missions and my brothers and Lauren and Blanche's mission, I sent letters to them every week. This was just amazing. And so we were in Africa, and when we first got there, before we got the computer hooked up, the brother Wilsback was there, one of the other elders, a couple elders. And so he sent a picture of an old mud hut. He sent it back home to our kids and said, "Well, we're here, and this is where we live. It says a little smelly in here, but Kay liked it because he said it smelled like manure, and manure smells like money." So he sent that home to our children, and some were really wondering whether we really lived there or not. So that was a good joke. But we could send emails to them every week, and it was wonderful. We had bought us a used laptop to take, and we didn't know much about them, but we bought this used laptop. The poor thing was kind of old and didn't do too good, but we kept it running. And towards the end of our mission, the screen kept getting black. It'd be black, and I couldn't see it. I have to turn it off 2 or 3 times and get it to go. It lasted till we got to the end of our mission, and then it just gave up the ghost and died. But we are sure happy with computers. Like, we never had TVs when we were young, but we didn't miss them because we didn't know we missed them. And we don't spend much time watching the TV now, but we love the laptop and sending emails and all the things you can look up on computers. They are just wonderful things. When our sons and Nyla went on missions, I didn't appreciate how hard they had to work. I didn't realize what missionaries have to do until we went ourselves, and see that how you work so hard to try to teach people, to find people that you can teach, and you try to get some to come to church, and they say they will, and they don't, or you teach them something about the gospel, they start to believe, and then Satan puts things in their path and detracts them. And our sons and Nyla, they all had to do that. And they worked hard, and they would write home and say about this person they were teaching, and for us to pray for them that they could have courage and join the church. Then I understood more about what missions really were and how good our children were to serve their missions, and how they tried to help other people. Well, Kay and I always planned on going on a mission whenever we could, when the children were grown. In fact, Kay was very anxious, and he would keep thinking, in a few years we can go on a mission. Well, those years went by fast. Raising the children, the years just went by too fast, and those were the best years. But then when it came along that all our children were gone, they were all married except Alan. So we talked to Alan, and we said, we would like to go on a mission. We wondered if he would keep track of our money and things at home, and kind of help us out that way. So he took us to the MTC the first time we went. And we went to the MTC. We loved it at the MTC. We just loved our mission. And I told people, the couples, if they don't go, they miss out. And at least they should go to the MTC, even if they couldn't go on a mission, because we just loved it there. Well, we went to Louisiana for 6 months, and then we came home, and Kay was running the farm in the fall. And then we went again the next fall on the 6 months mission. But I forgot to tell what happened to Kay before we went on our mission. We had our mission call in 1996, and we were going to go that fall. Well, Kay got up on the roof to fix the antenna or something, and I was warning him, be careful up there, that roof is the slick metal roof. Well, sure enough, he came sliding down and slid off the roof and fell down and broke his shoulder, his elbow, and banged him all up and cut him all up. And there his arm was all, had to have surgery and everything. Well, Cordell and Kelton, not Cordell and Dallin, they came up and said, we're coming to help you get the crops planted. So they came up and helped get everything planted for that fall so that we could go. So we did go that fall. When we went on our first mission, and Dallin took care of our money and would send us what we needed and take care of our bills at home. And then when we went to Louisiana the second winter, he called up. He wrote us a letter. He didn't call up because we didn't call up very much, but he wrote us a letter and he said, I think I'll come to see you if I won't disturb your mission. I don't want to slow you down from your mission, but I'd like to come and see you. So he did. He came down to Coshada, Louisiana, and he went around with us as our partner, as our companion, as we went around to talk to people. And then we would always go to the dances to get to know people. Every Saturday night they had a dance. So Dallin went with us to the dance, and he is a good country dancer. And so he and I would dance. I'd try to keep up with his dancing, which was really fun. And the people, they liked to watch us. And some people would come and say, do that again, and we like to watch you. And then 2 or 3 of the ladies, the older ladies, probably older than me, came up and they wanted to dance with him because he was such a fun dancer. So he danced with a few of them. So we had a good time. He went to church with us, and he was our missionary companion for about a week. Well, then after we were home for a while, and we decided to rent the farm, and so we put in our papers to go on a full-time mission. And surprise, surprise, we got called to Africa. Africa. I had never imagined anything like that. We had the family kind of guess where we might go, and Annelle had guessed Bosnia or someplace in Africa, but nobody else had, and I had not ever even thought of it. Well, I was so amazed, and I was a little nervous, but we had heard a couple talk who had been to Kenya, Africa on their mission. So we called them up and we asked them, now will they have bathrooms and running water or not? And she said, oh yes, you'll have bathrooms and there's running water. The couples, they have them in nice houses. So I said, okay, we can go. And I prayed to the Lord, and I knew that he wanted us to go. And that's where he wanted us to go, so I said, okay. I was fine with that. Well, when we got there, it was so much nicer than I ever thought. We had this nice house that we lived in. We had a stove and a kitchen and a tile on the floor, and we had it was so much nicer. I kept saying, this is so nice. And one of the elders said, "Oh, that's good that you're thinking that way." He said one of the other couples, the lady cried for 3 months because she was in Africa. But it was just amazing. And we loved being there. It was so interesting. The people are kind and nice, and they're Christians. England has done a lot for Africa because they taught them to be Christians. And so they love to talk to missionaries, and they love to talk to people from America. In fact, they all would like to come to America. But they didn't all, not a lot of them joined the church, but they are interested, and they would talk to you, and they would come to church a little. But it's a struggling church, just like in the early days of the church. It's the early days in Africa. But then one thing I'd always wanted to do all my life, I wanted to go to Switzerland. And I told Kay, I want to go to Switzerland. And he'd always say, "Oh, we haven't even been around the United States. You haven't even been to Newton Dam." And I'd say, "Well, I still want to go." Well, one day I had to drive down through the valley once, and so I went over to Newton Dam. And I did, and I came home and I said, "Kay, I've been to Newton Dam. Now we can go to Switzerland." Well, the way we got to go was on the way home from Africa, we asked the church if we could stay a couple of weeks in England, and they said we could. So we stopped in England, which we had to make a plane change there anyway. We stopped in England, and our friend's son, they were on a mission with us in Africa. They were from England. Their son picked us up at the airport and took us to his home. And he showed us how to go around and what to do. So he took us to the airport, or to the train station, and we went at the train station and got on the train that goes underneath the channel. So we rode under the channel over into France and changed trains in France, and then we went to Germany. And we had some friends who had been serving in Germany or in Africa that lived in Germany. So we went to their house. They helped us to rent a car and gave us a map and where to go. And so we got a car and we drove to Switzerland. And it was beautiful, such a beautiful place. Now my Beutler grandparents, were both born in Switzerland. So I always wanted to go. And my dad, his mother tongue was the German-Swiss language. And he went on a mission to Switzerland, so he always talked about Switzerland. So that's why I always wanted to go. So we got to go, and it was such a beautiful place. I wondered why they ever left there, because it just beautiful Alps and everything in the country. But they came to America, and so I was blessed to be born in America. Well, then we came home from Africa, and we stayed home for a while. Then we put in our papers and went to Temple Square, Salt Lake City. And that was wonderful too, because all the young sisters from all over the world that we got to serve with, and they're so sweet. And we just loved being there. There were several couples, lots of couples. We got to serve up to Park City at the family history place up there. We'd go to stay for a week at a time at Park City. We just loved being on Temple Square. We got to go to all the things at night when we weren't serving, all the activities and the productions they were putting on. We got to go to the Tabernacle Choir every Sunday morning. Then we would serve Sunday afternoon on the square. It was just a wonderful place. We'd go to sacrament meeting at 7:30 in the morning, and then we'd go to then we go over to the Tabernacle Choir, and then we'd have lunch, and then we'd go serve that afternoon. It was really, really nice. One of the worst days of my life was when we were in Africa. At first we were in Uganda, and then the mission president called us to go over to Kenya because the lady, one of the couples, had got sick and she had to go home. So they sent us over to Kenya, and he thought we could maybe go back and forth. But we found out it took so long to go across the border between the two countries. It took us hours because they stop you at the gate, and then they'd take you in and fill up papers, and then they'd want you to pay a little bit of money, and the church does not pay bribes, and so we didn't pay any bribes, so then we'd have to wait, and then we go in there, there's a bunch of trucks, a whole bunch of trucks, and they have to wait. It took us a few hours to get across the border. So when we told the mission president, he decided we wouldn't go back and forth, but we should go back one time, back to Uganda. And so Kay thought we'd avoid the border and we'd go this other way up and over the mountains. Well, it was getting towards Thanksgiving, and it was a rainy season. We started up this road to go a different way, up a little bit north and go over the mountains. And it was rainy, and the clay on the road was so slick. It was just, we were sliding everywhere, which way. And we'd slide around, and then we'd slide off the road. And as soon as we'd slide off, here come a bunch of black men from nowhere. They would hear trucks, I guess, because there weren't very many, and they'd kind of watch them. And when we'd slide off the road, here they'd come. They'd all come and push us back on, and they wanted a little bit of shillings for helping us. So we'd go a little farther, and it was still raining, and we were up there in the canyon, and we couldn't really, it was too far to turn around and go back home. And so we'd go a little farther, and we'd slide off the road again. Finally, about the third or fourth, fifth time, these black men came out, and they said, "You'll never make it, but this guy, he knows the road, and he can drive. He'll get you there." Well, we didn't know what else to do. We couldn't go back, couldn't go forward. We didn't have any phone in those days. We didn't have any, the mission president did not know where we were. He were up there in the mountains, and we didn't know when we'd get through. I said, "Well, how long is it gonna rain?" And they said, "Oh, about 2 weeks." So we had this black man drive us. Well, we were in this pickup, so I sat in the back with we had a pile of things back there we were taking over to the missionaries. And so I sat back there on there, and Kay sat with him, and he drove. And I just sat back there and closed my eyes and prayed all day that we could make it, because we'd just slip and slide, and the rain kept coming. It kept getting later and later in the day. We got higher on this mountain, and I didn't know if we'd ever get out of there. Well, finally it's getting dark. We're clear up the top of the mountain. I thought, where are we going to stay? What will we do tonight? But that man that was driving, he knew there was a little truck stop, a little village up there. He drove right to it. But as we got there, there were about 3 or 4 trucks stuck on the road. They could not go. So he had to drive around the trucks and up and around, wasn't even on the road. But he got us to this little building, and he said, "We stay here." Well, he took us down this little hall. It was a little cement hall building down the cement path and a cement room. There was this little square room, and it had 2 cots with a blanket on. And then it was over here was a hole in the floor. That was the bathroom. And that jug of water to wash your hands. That was what we had to stay in. But I was so thankful to get there. I thought, of all the places that I could be, I'm so thankful at least we have some place to stay. So we went in there, that little room, and then we got thinking, the driver has the keys to the truck. We didn't think about it. He went in some other room. He had the keys to the truck. We thought, well, we hope he doesn't just drive off with the truck. So we just prayed a lot. The next morning we went out, and here he was. He was there waiting for us. He was a good man. So he waited for us, and he drove. So we got in the truck again, and it was still muddy. It wasn't raining that morning. It was still really muddy, so we still had a long way to go. He drove us on that muddy road, and drove and drove and drove. And so finally, about, probably 2 or 3 more hours, we got to a highway. And it was an oiled road, and it would head back to Uganda. We finally got over that mountain, the worst day of my life. So we paid the driver some money for coming, and we said, "How will you go back?" He said, "Oh, I catch a ride." So I guess he'd catch a ride with some truck or something that's going up the mountain. And so we made it back over to Uganda in time for the Thanksgiving day. Our next mission, we went to Cody, Wyoming, and we served in the visitor center there. And we had a great time because there were 4 couples. We took turns in the visitor center, so we had time to go around and see different things on our days off. We had great time with the different couples, and one time we went to Mount Rushmore and saw Mount Rushmore, drove over there. But mostly we enjoyed the ward, and we enjoyed going up to Billings, Montana to the temple, and to the place on our way home from the temple one time. We went to Custer's Last Stand, and we happened to come there the day of the very day it happened, and they were doing a reenaction of what happened. So they had Indians there in their costumes and on their horses, and they had a parade, and then the Indians went down over the hills and the soldiers, and they kind of put on a mock war down there. We happened to just go the right day and saw that. It was very interesting. So our last mission was wonderful. It was in 2013. We decided to go for the winter. We put in our papers, and we were called to Tallahassee, Florida. They asked us to serve in the office, which was great. I always wanted to do that, but I knew Kay wasn't an office person. He likes to be out talking to people. But they asked us to serve in the office, so we did. And I just loved every day there with Sister Mills. Elder and Sister Mills were the office couple, and we helped them, and Kay helped Brother Mills. He even learned how to use the computer a little bit, and then he would help with the cars and the bikes and all the things like that. And we just loved every day serving with the Mills there, and now we still get to see them off and on since they live in Utah, and so sometimes we go to see them. Well, our missions were all good. We loved Africa the best, and Florida, maybe those two. But we served in the Logan Temple for 2 years before we left on our mission, and then we are serving there now since we've been home, which is wonderful service because you get so many new friends. Besides, you get to really know the temple ordinances and try to understand and appreciate what goes on in the temple. And now we're seeing our grandchildren get married in the temple. We're seeing our grandchildren go on missions. We're so pleased with how they're doing because they're all just wanting to be in the church. They love the Lord, and they want to do what He would want them to do. So throughout our life, raising our children was the best thing we ever did. And because they turned out to be good, upstanding citizens who all love the Lord and who try to do His will, and they're raising their families to do the same, which is so wonderful. And so now our 46 grandchildren, and they're all trying to do the same. And we have about 15 or 16 grandchildren that are married now, and they're raising their children to love the Lord also. It's just so rewarding. It's just the best thing that could happen to a family. So the best thing was raising our children and seeing our grandchildren, and the second best things was the church callings and the missions that we've served. Church callings are wonderful because they help you to grow. You learn so much, and you become a better person by having done them. And so we are so grateful to live in America. We love America, and we love our church, and we love our prophet, and we love the Lord. I have had many different callings through the years, and I have enjoyed them, and I've learned a lot. I've been in the primary. One time I added up, I was in the primary different positions for 23 years. I was primary president, counselor, music leader, blazer leader, teacher, about anything. Then I was also the state primary president for about 4 years, 1980 to 84. And I had a great time there because I got to know all the people in the wards. That was really nice. Then I was really study president twice. Once when Kelton was a baby. He was about 1.5 years old, And I had 6 children, and they asked me to be Relief Society president. Kelton was a good little guy, and he'd go into nursery. He liked it. He'd go in there and play. But Nyla was a little scared. She was 3, and she was a little scared to go in there without her mother, so I'd take her with me. So it was kind of a learning experience for all of us. Then the next year, I was only in for just a little over a year. Then Dwayne was born, so I was released. The next time I was released as Relief Society president was when all the kids were a little older, and Heidi was about 6, and that was much easier because I didn't feel like I was neglecting my family as much. I'd go and do a lot of Relief Society work while they were at school. And so it was a great experience. I loved being that. One of my favorite callings was being gospel doctrine teacher, which I did for 5 years. And at first I was really scared. Didn't know if I wanted to do that because it was kind of scaring to be up there in front of all those people who already knew the gospel. But I just really loved that because I studied the gospel all week, and I enjoyed teaching after I got used to it. When I was 10 years old and my brother Henry was 5, we both had our tonsils out the same day. We went to Preston, to the old hospital that was there, and I can't remember too much about it because they put us to sleep, but I remember that my parents told us that afterward we could have an ice cream cone. So we got the surgery done, and they were taking us home, so they went and bought us an ice cream cone. So Henry and I were excited to get ice cream, but our mouth was so sore we could not stick our tongue out to lick it. Oh, it just hurt to move your tongue, so you couldn't do that. So we had to take our finger and get some ice cream and put it in our mouth. And that's about all I remember about that. In 2009, something happened to my eye and I lost the sight in one eye. A vein broke behind the retina, and there was no repair that there wasn't nothing they could do. It was already too late. So I have lost the sight of one eye, but the one thing I have learned is to appreciate sight. I didn't appreciate it before because I could always see very well and had such good sight. But now I really appreciate it, and I thank the Lord that I have one good eye.